If you don't make it by dawn, every child in Nome will be dead. Those words weren't spoken, they were carved into me. I remember the telegraph officer's trembling hands as he read the message aloud, his voice cracking under the weight of it. The wind outside howled through the cracks in the wall, and the lamp on the table flickered like it, too, was afraid. Nome, 84 miles away. Diphtheria spreading like a curse. The doctor's letter said the antitoxin was the only hope left, and I was the last link in the chain. The others had done their part, men braver and faster than me, but the storm was closing in. The final stretch would fall to whoever was foolish enough or desperate enough to face it. That fool was me. My name is Jonas Kerr, and I've spent most of my 34 years talking to wind and ice more than people. I'm a musher by trade, a hunter by necessity, and a man who owes this frozen land more than it'll ever owe me. I've buried friends under this snow. I've watched the northern lights dance above graves that had no names. But never, not once, had the tundra looked as alive and cruel as it did that night. The sergeant slid the metal canister across the table toward me. It clinked against the wood, cold and heavy, no larger than a thermos. Inside were 10 vials of life, antitoxin that could save a town. I reached for it, my gloved fingers brushing the steel. The chill ran through the leather into my bones. He said nothing. He didn't have to. Every man in that room knew the odds. Outside, the temperature had dropped to 50 below, and the wind was slicing trees like paper. I tucked the canister under my coat, close to my chest. How long since the last team left? 6 hours, he said. They'll never make it through the bluff. The bridge is gone. I nodded once. Then I'll find another way. He stared at me like he wanted to stop me, but didn't have the words. Instead, he whispered, God help you, Jonas. I stepped outside, and the cold hit me like a hammer. It stole my breath and froze my eyelashes together. The world was nothing but darkness and snow, sky and ground indistinguishable. But I wasn't alone. Togo waited by the sled, head high, breath steaming like smoke from a forge. His fur shimmered under the weak lantern light, silver and gray, streaked with scars from old battles. He didn't bark. He didn't need to. We'd spoken 1,000 times without words. The rest of the team, 8 dogs, strong and restless, stamped their paws in the snow, tails whipping in the wind. Togo stood at the front, glancing back once as if to ask, Are you sure? I fastened the last buckle on the harness, my fingers numb even inside the mitts. We're the last ones, old boy, I said quietly. No one else is coming. He gave a short huff, the kind of sound that felt like understanding. The sled groaned under its own weight as I climbed aboard, securing the serum to my chest. The rope creaked, the dogs tensed, the wind howled like a warning. For a heartbeat, I hesitated. I thought of the children, their small throats closing, their mothers praying in candlelight. And then I thought of silence, the kind that follows when prayers go unanswered. No, we couldn't let that silence win. Hike! Togo leapt forward, the team exploding into motion. Snow sprayed behind us like smoke from cannon fire. The world blurred into white chaos. The storm swallowed us whole. Within minutes, I couldn't see more than a few feet ahead. The wind screamed so loud it drowned my thoughts. But I trusted the rhythm of the sled, the weight of the reins in my hands, the sound of paws pounding the earth. Somewhere in that endless dark, I whispered, We'll bring them life, Togo, or we'll die trying. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. The first gust tore through, nearly knocking me from the sled, and I laughed, a wild, frightened laugh that turned to ice on my lips. Because I knew, deep down, that this wasn't a journey anymore. It was a reckoning. And before the sun rose again, the Arctic would decide which of us was worth keeping. My name is Jonas Kerr, and I've never been good at waiting for storms to pass. I was born into them. The first memory I have is of wind. Not the soft kind that dances through summer fields, but the kind that screams across the world, unforgiving, invisible, endless. My mother used to say the North doesn't raise children, it tests them. By the time I was 10, I'd already learned how to skin a hare, mend a harness, and read the sky. My father taught me that, or what was left of him anyway. He died in a snow collapse hauling timber when I was 12. After that, the dogs became my family, the only living creatures that didn't lie. I remember the first night I met Togo like I remember the first time I saw the northern lights, something wild and alive that made the world feel smaller and sacred all at once. He wasn't a hero back then. He was a half-grown stray with frost in his fur and defiance in his eyes. He'd wandered into our camp one night, thin as bone, snapping at anyone who came near. One of the men raised his rifle, but I stopped him. "Leave him," I said. "He's got fight in him." The dog growled, teeth flashing. I tossed him a scrap of salted fish. He didn't eat it right away. He waited until I looked away, then dragged it into the dark. By morning, he was gone. A week later, I woke to the sound of barking. The same dog was outside the tent, pacing circles around our sleds, chasing the dawn light like it owed him something. This time, he didn't run when I stepped out. He just stared. That was the beginning of us. Two creatures too stubborn to die and too proud to ask for help. I called him Togo, after the island my father used to point to on old maps. Said it was where the wind sleeps. He laughed when he said it. I guess Togo was my way of keeping that laugh alive. The years went by, and Togo became more than just a lead dog. He was my eyes when the world turned white, my hands when mine froze stiff. He'd sense thin ice before I could hear it crack. He'd smell storms hours before they came. And when I lost my way once near Norton Sound, it was Togo who circled back, grabbed a rope in his teeth, and dragged me, half-conscious, back to the sled. That was when I stopped thinking of him as mine. He didn't belong to me. He belonged to the North. The telegram that changed everything came on a Sunday evening. I'd just returned from a supply run, my beard stiff with frost, my hands numb. The telegraph officer met me at the door, his eyes wide. "Gnome's sick," he said. "Doctor says it's diphtheria. Children dying already. They're sending serum by train from Anchorage, but the line's buried. They're calling for mushers to run relays." I remember standing there, trying to take it in. One message, one disease, one chance. The map lay open on the table. Anchorage to Nenana, Nenana to Norton, Norton to Nome. Nearly 700 miles of wilderness and ice. Each man would carry the serum as far as he could, then pass it to the next. I volunteered before I even thought about it. The officer looked at me like I was crazy. "Jonas, they're saying 70 below. Gale winds. You won't make it." I looked at Togo, curled by the stove, his ears twitching even in sleep. He opened one golden eye, just long enough to meet mine, and I swear he knew. "Maybe not," I said. "But we'll try." That night, I packed light, just food for the dogs, a flask, and one prayer I didn't believe in. As I fastened the sled harness, I could feel the storm building in the air, the pressure rising, the wind restless. I knelt beside Togo, scratching behind his ear. "It's just another run, boy," I lied. But deep down, we both knew better. This wasn't a run. This was destiny tightening its grip on the rope. He stood, pressed his forehead against my arm, and exhaled softly, one warm breath against the cold. It was all the answer I needed. And as the first snow began to fall, I realized something that has never left me since. Courage doesn't roar. It shivers, limps, bleeds. If hell has a sound, moving anyway. It isn't screaming. It's coughing. That's what gnomes sounded like when we left Anchorage behind. Not fire and fury, but the thin, choking gasps of children struggling to breathe. I didn't see the town myself, not yet. But every man on the trail spoke of it in whispers. The smell of sickness, the hollow eyes of mothers who'd stopped weeping because their tears froze before they fell. Even the dogs seemed to sense it. When we passed through the smaller settlements, they didn't bark. They just watched us, their tails tucked low, as if they knew we were hauling more than a sled. We were hauling time, and there wasn't much of it left. The wind was calmer that morning, though the air carried a warning. The kind of stillness that means the world is holding its breath before it strikes again. We'd reached the halfway point near Golovin Bay, where a group of trappers and miners had gathered to help ferry supplies and messages between the teams. The men there looked worn thin, faces raw from windburn, lips cracked, frost clinging to their beards. One of them, a tall fellow with a broken nose, offered me coffee thick as mud. "Word from Nome," he said, his voice gravel. "3 more gone overnight. 2 of them kids." The cup trembled in my hand. I set it down before it spilled. Another man spat into the snow. "The doctor says if that serum don't get there by tomorrow, the rest won't see the week." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was heavy, like a shovel striking frozen ground. I walked away from the fire and found Togo sitting near the edge of the ridge, staring out over the tundra. The sky was a bruised gray, low and thick, and the sun a pale ghost behind it. He didn't move when I approached. You feel it too, don't you? I said. He turned his head slightly, one ear flicking back at my voice. His breath curled white in the air. There's something strange about animals in the Arctic. They know before we do. The temperature drops a few degrees, the wind shifts a certain way, and their bodies change. Togo's hackles lifted slightly. His eyes narrowed. He didn't growl, didn't bark. He just watched the horizon, the way a soldier watches an enemy trench. When I touched his neck, I felt it. His pulse, steady but fierce. Alive. Ready. That night, I sat by the fire writing a letter I knew no one would ever read. It was for my mother. She'd been gone 10 years, but old habits die harder than people. If I don't make it, Ma, tell the wind I tried. Tell it I brought something more than wood or fur this time. Tell it I carried hope. The words blurred in the firelight, my fingers stiff from the cold. When I finished, I folded the paper and tucked it inside my coat. I looked across the camp. The other mushers were already asleep, huddled under their furs, faces buried in scarves. The dogs dozed in the snow, their bodies curled tight, tails covering their noses. All except Togo. He stayed awake, eyes fixed on the north, the muscles in his legs twitching. Every so often, he'd raise his head and sniff the wind, as if expecting a signal from something only he could hear. When I finally laid down beside the fire, I whispered to him, "Tomorrow, we start the last run." He didn't move, didn't blink, but as I closed my eyes, I felt the faint thud of his paw against the ground, a slow, deliberate beat, like a promise. At dawn, we rose before the sun. The sky was the color of iron, and the wind had begun to change, restless, rising, whispering things no man could translate. The others hesitated, staring at the path ahead, an endless white emptiness stretching into the unknown. One muttered, "We'll never make it." I tightened my gloves and climbed onto the sled. "Maybe not," I said, "but someone has to try." Togo looked back once, the first light of morning catching the frost in his fur. And then, without command, without warning, he started running. The others shouted after us, voices fading behind the storm. We didn't look back, because in this land, looking back means stopping, and stopping means dying. They called it the chain of hands. From Anchorage to Nome, more than 20 men, each one holding the same fragile hope in a metal canister no heavier than a loaf of bread. Each hand passing it to the next, through wind and ice, through night and fear, until the chain reached its final link. And that last link was me. When I reached Bluff, the outpost was barely standing. The roof sagged under a weight of snow, and the windows were caked in frost. Smoke rose weakly from the chimney, a tired heartbeat in a dying world. A man stumbled out as I approached, beard iced solid, eyes red-rimmed. He was clutching a small bundle wrapped in wool. The serum. His voice cracked as he spoke. "Your cur." I nodded, stepping off the sled, my legs half dead from the cold. He thrust the bundle into my chest with both hands. "God bless you. I can't go another mile." His gloves were stiff with blood. Frostbite. His fingers were black at the tips. I took the canister without speaking, feeling its weight. Light, yet somehow heavier than anything I'd ever carried. Inside was life. Enough to save a town. Enough to keep the world believing in mercy a little longer. Behind him, the wind howled and the dogs whined. The storm had arrived sooner than anyone expected. I looked north, the direction of Nome, and saw nothing but white. "Bridge is gone," he said, shaking his head. "The ice field broke 3 days back. If you go that way, you'll drown." "I'll find another path," I told him. He stared at me for a long time, snow swirling between us. "You'll die out there." "Maybe," I said, glancing at Togo. "But not before I try." We didn't linger. Every second was a life slipping away in Nome. As I secured the canister inside my coat, the other man watched in silence. When I finished, he lifted his arm in a weary salute, half blessing, half farewell. I returned it, then turned toward the horizon. The dogs were restless. They could feel the storm rolling in. The sky wasn't gray anymore. It was alive. Black veins of cloud twisted together, swallowing what little light was left. I gave the command. "Hike." Togo lunged first, the others following in perfect rhythm. The sled jerked forward, slicing through the snow with a hiss. Wind tore at my hood, clawed at my face. The world narrowed to motion and sound. The scrape of runners, the whip of rope, the thunder of paws. The man's voice faded behind me. God go with you, cur. I didn't look back. For hours, we ran through a blur of storm and silence. The trail was gone, every landmark buried. I navigated by memory, by instinct, and by Togo. He was more than muscle and speed. He was judgment. He'd pause at every fork, sniff the wind, then veer sharply as if reading some invisible map etched into the snow. Once, he stopped suddenly, his body rigid, ears forward. I followed his gaze and saw nothing. But when I stepped off the sled, I felt it beneath my boots. Hollow ground. Thin ice. One step more, and we'd have vanished beneath the surface. I exhaled shakily, my breath turning to frost. Good boy, I whispered. You just saved us. He didn't wag his tail. He just stared ahead, waiting. I climbed back on, heart pounding. All right then, lead the way. By dusk, the world had turned to glass and noise. Snow hammered the sled in sheets. The wind shrieked through the harness lines. The dog's fur glistened with frost, their breath rising like ghosts. My hands were bleeding where the reins had frozen to my skin, but I didn't dare stop. Each mile felt like theft, stealing time from death itself. And all the while, I kept thinking of that chain, each man before me, each frozen hand that had passed this canister along. Somewhere in the blinding white, I imagined them still running beside me, shadows of courage whispering through the gale. We weren't 20 men anymore. We were one heartbeat, stretched across the Arctic. And ahead of me, the lead of that heartbeat, my dog, my compass, my salvation, moved like a piece of the storm itself. Night fell fast. The temperature dropped another 10 degrees. I could no longer tell where the land ended and the sky began. The sled felt lighter, the wind stronger. Somewhere behind me, a piece of rope snapped. The last lantern shattered against the ice. And in that absolute darkness, I heard only two things. The sound of Togo's breathing, and my own voice whispering, "Don't let go, boy. Not yet. You never really see a blizzard coming. You feel it. It starts as a vibration in your bones, a pulse beneath the snow, a shift in the air so subtle that only creatures born to the cold can sense it. Togo felt it before I did. We'd been running for hours through nothing but darkness. The world had become a tunnel of white noise, the horizon erased. I thought maybe the worst had passed. Maybe the sky had run out of cruelty. But then Togo slowed. His head turned toward the north, ears pricking. The air thickened, and the sound came, deep, rolling, endless. Not wind, not thunder. A wall of snow and death coming for us at the speed of God's own fury. The blizzard was here. The first gust hit like a punch. The sled veered sideways, and I gripped the handlebar with both hands as the wind roared so hard it flattened the world. Snow came at us sideways, needles of ice that cut skin and froze blood before it could spill. I couldn't open my eyes without them watering. My eyelashes stuck together, my beard stiffened into iron. "Togo," I shouted, though my voice vanished into the storm. He was still running, still pulling. His tail whipped like a banner, the team behind him barely shadows against the white void. The temperature dropped fast, too fast. The kind of cold that made metal groan and lungs ache with every breath. I leaned forward, pressing my body low over the sled, using my weight to keep it grounded. The serum canister was tied against my chest, pressing into my ribs with every bump. If I lost that, the whole world would stop meaning anything. There's a point in every storm where you stop believing you'll live. Your mind just goes quiet. It isn't fear anymore. It's acceptance. I felt that silence creeping in, like frost over glass. My hands went numb first, then my feet, then my thoughts. The reins slipped once, and I almost didn't grab them. That's how it happens. Death in the north isn't a monster. It's a whisper that convinces you to let go. But then I heard something, faint, steady, pulling me back. Togo's breathing. Not panicked, not afraid, just working, always working. He wasn't running from the storm, he was fighting it. He'd lean into each gust, lowering his body to the ground, muscles tight, eyes half shut against the snow. Every few minutes he'd glance back, not for direction, but to check that I was still there. That look kept me alive. We lost the trail completely near Topcoke Hill. The world was white from every direction, sky, earth, breath, thought. I couldn't tell up from down. The sled tipped once, skidding sideways. The dogs howled, fighting to right it. One of the runners snapped against a hidden rock, jarring my shoulder as I slammed into the handlebar. Pain brought me back. Pain reminded me I still existed. I crawled forward, unhooking the last lantern from the sled. I held it up, but the wind ripped it away instantly. Gone, swallowed by snow. All light was gone now. All except one. The faint glow of Togo's eyes when lightning flashed across the clouds above us. They caught the light like gold, fierce and certain. I crawled closer, pressed my forehead to his neck for a moment, and whispered, "You keep us alive, and I'll keep you warm. That's the deal." He barked once, a sharp sound swallowed by the wind, and lunged forward again. The storm grew worse before it broke. Hours, maybe more, passed in a blur of pain and motion. I stopped counting distance, stopped counting time. I just breathed when I could and trusted the rope that connected me to him. And then, as suddenly as it began, it changed. The wind dropped. The sound softened. The sky, still gray, began to shimmer faintly, like dawn behind glass. Togo slowed to a trot, ears twitching, sides heaving. We had made it through. The silence after a blizzard isn't peace, it's shock. The land holds its breath, and so do you, afraid that moving will wake it again. I stumbled off the sled, my knees buckling. The snow beneath us was smooth and untouched, stretching to infinity. I looked up at the faint light breaking through the clouds and whispered hoarsely, "We're still here." Togo turned his head, frost hanging from his muzzle, and gave a single bark, low and sure. For the first time in hours, I let myself believe we might actually live. Some nights in the north, you swear the world is whispering to you. The snow doesn't just fall, it speaks. The wind doesn't just blow, it sings. If you listen long enough, you begin to hear voices that aren't your own. That morning, I realized one of us truly could. The storm had left behind a world of glass. The sky was pale silver, the snow blinding under the weak sun. Every step felt like walking through broken crystal. The air was too still, too clean, like the earth was pretending it hadn't just tried to kill us. I checked the sled. Half a runner cracked, 2 sacks of meat frozen solid, 1 flask shattered. The serum was still pressed against my chest, cold but intact. The dogs lay in a heap of exhaustion, steam rising from their bodies. All except Togo. He stood apart, tail low, staring north. His ears twitched, his nose lifted slightly as if tasting the air. "What is it, boy?" I asked. He didn't move, didn't blink, didn't even seem to breathe. Then, slowly, he turned his head and looked at me. There was something in his eyes, a warning, not fear, something older. A second later, the snow under my boots cracked. I dropped to my knees instinctively. The sound was subtle, almost shy, the brittle whisper of ice giving way. I pressed my glove into the snow and felt the faint tremor beneath it. We were standing on a frozen river, and it was waking up. "Togo," I shouted, grabbing for the sled ropes. "Back! Back!" He didn't wait for command. He spun, barking sharp and loud, rallying the team. The dogs scrambled to their feet, panic in their movements, but he cut through them with authority, shoulders low, teeth bared, snapping at the stragglers until they fell into line. The ice groaned again, a sound that came from the deep, like something ancient shifting in its sleep. Then came the crack, a long, low rip that sliced through the air like thunder. "Togo, go!" The team surged forward. The sled lurched violently, snow spraying. Behind us, the river split open, a black line crawling across the white, widening faster than breath. Water gurgled up, dark and cold as death. The dogs ran, their paws slipping, claws digging into the slick ice. Togo's body was pure tension, muscles straining, head low, eyes locked on the far bank. He was pulling not just the sled, not just me, but the very idea of hope across a crumbling world. When the sled hit the far side, I nearly fell off. The rear runner caught the lip of the crack. I heard would splinter. Then Togo did something I will never forget. He turned back. He saw the rear end sinking. And instead of running to safety, he jumped toward it. He landed halfway across the breaking ice, teeth flashing as he caught the lead rope between his jaws. His paws slipped, but he dug in, snarling, pulling, muscles trembling as he fought to drag the sled free. "Come on, boy," I screamed. "Come on." For a second, it looked hopeless. Then, with a final heave that seemed to tear the world apart, the sled jerked loose and slid onto solid ground. Togo stumbled, chest heaving, and collapsed into the snow. I was beside him in seconds, dropping to my knees, arms around his body. His fur was soaked, his heart pounding so hard I could feel it through my coat. "You mad, beautiful creature," I whispered. "You saved us again." He tilted his head weakly, pressing his forehead into my arm, his breath steaming between us. The river behind us widened, swallowing the trail completely. The route was gone. Every other team that tried to follow would find nothing but open water. That meant only one thing: we were alone. The only path left was through the old ridge route, a stretch no one had used in years, buried in drifts and haunted by avalanches. It would add hours, maybe days, but there was no choice. I untied the ropes, checked the serum again, and looked north. The sun had already begun to fade behind the clouds, painting the snow with faint blue shadows. Togo rose unsteadily, his paws bleeding through the frost, and stood before the sled again. He didn't wait for command. The wind picked up, soft at first, then rising into a long, low wail that echoed across the valley. It wasn't random. It sounded almost alive, almost like it was calling his name. He lifted his head, ears twitching, and barked once in reply. That's when I understood. He didn't follow orders. He followed the wind. And whatever it told him that night. There are moments when the north stops pretending to be a place and shows its true face. Not land, not sky, not anything human. Just endless, breathing cold. That night, it bared its teeth. The wind came from nowhere. One moment we were running under a pale, glassy moon. The next the world was gone. The ridge ahead disappeared into a wall of white, so thick it looked solid. I shouted, but even my own voice was ripped away. The snow wasn't falling, it was rising, swirling upward, sideways, backward, alive. I pulled my hood tight, leaned low over the sled, and yelled, "Togo, keep straight." He didn't need the command. He was already moving like a shadow against the storm, each step measured, powerful, sure. But I could see his legs shaking from exhaustion. His paws were bleeding again, leaving faint trails of red in the snow before the wind erased them. We climbed higher onto the ridge, each foot of elevation making the storm worse. The sled tilted dangerously as the ground sloped. I could feel the ropes straining, the weight of the serum pressing into my chest. Then came the sound I'll never forget, a low, rumbling moan, deep inside the mountain. At first, I thought it was thunder. It wasn't. It was the ridge itself moving. Avalanche. Togo. Downslope. Now. He pivoted instantly, throwing his body left. The sled skidded, nearly tipping as we plunged off the ridge. Behind us, the snow let go. The sound was indescribable, a roar of collapsing sky. The world shook. The air turned solid. I looked back once and saw it, an ocean of white tearing down the ridge, devouring the world. "Togo, run!" I screamed. He ran. God, he ran. The others followed, their bodies blurs of motion, every ounce of life they had pouring into the harness. I couldn't see. I couldn't think. All I knew was motion, the jolt of the sled, the lash of the wind, the weight of the storm chasing us like judgment. We hit a drift and went airborne. For one sickening second, everything went silent. Then we crashed. The sled flipped sideways, throwing me into the snow. The rope snapped. The world went black. When I opened my eyes, there was no sound, no light, just pressure. Snow pressing against my face, my chest, my legs. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. This is it, I thought. The mountain's taking me too. I tried to shout, but snow filled my mouth. My lungs screamed. My hands clawed upward, weakly, blindly. The cold had weight now. It wasn't a temperature, it was a thing, crawling into my bones. Somewhere in that suffocating dark, I heard it. A bark. Faint, muffled. Then another. I stopped struggling, straining to listen. It was closer now, desperate, rhythmic. Togo. He was digging. Light. A sliver at first. Then a widening glow as snow scattered above me. I gasped when his paws broke through, his muzzle appearing in the hole, eyes wild and glistening. He barked once, sharp and urgent, then kept digging until his teeth hit the rope tied to my belt. He grabbed it in his jaws and pulled. The snow shifted, and air rushed in. I dragged myself upward with what little strength I had left, bursting through the surface like a drowning man gasping for life. The sky above was a blur of swirling white and gray. The avalanche had stopped, but the wind still howled, carrying snow in sheets across the frozen plain. I fell to my knees beside him. "You found me," I whispered, voice cracking. He whined softly, pressing his head into my chest. His fur was caked with ice. His body trembled, but his tail moved once, slow and steady. I looked around. The sled was overturned, half buried, one of the dogs missing. The serum canister was still strapped to me, unbelievably still there. I laughed, half crazed, the sound swallowed by the wind. "We're not dead yet," I said. Togo looked at me, head tilted slightly, as if to answer, "Then move before you are." It took hours to right the sled and reharness what was left of the team. We were battered, bleeding, half blind, but alive. When we started moving again, Togo didn't wait for my command. He just lowered his head against the wind and pulled, steady and relentless. And as the blizzard screamed around us, I realized something terrifying and beautiful. The only sound louder than the storm was his heartbeat, and somehow, it was keeping time with mine. There are places the maps lie about. Stretches of land that look solid ink on parchment, but shift like breath beneath your feet. That morning, we reached one. The storm had calmed into silence, but it wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet that feels alive. No birds, no cracking trees, not even the wind dared speak. The sky was a dull silver dome, and the world below it seemed made of glass. That's when I realized we were standing on the Topcoke River, frozen nearly solid. Nearly. The sled runners made a low groan as they slid forward. Each scrape echoed across the emptiness. I knew that sound. It wasn't the clean hiss of snow. It was the thin, brittle moan of water pretending to be land. "Togo," I said softly, "easy now." He slowed without command, the team following in near silence. Frost hung from their fur like salt on driftwood. Every paw step was a question. Every creak beneath us was an answer we didn't want. I kept my eyes on Togo's tail. The small, rhythmic sway of it was the only thing keeping me steady. His ears flicked back at every sound. Then, without warning, he stopped. The sled slid a few feet forward before halting. The lead line went taut. Togo was crouched low, his nose pressed against the ice. His body stiffened, and he let out a low growl that rose into a whine. I stepped off the sled and knelt beside him. "What is it, boy?" He looked at me, then down. That's when I saw it. Beneath the surface, just a few inches below, dark water moved. Slow, heavy currents twisting like black smoke. The river wasn't frozen through. It was wearing a mask. For a moment, I thought about turning back. There was no bridge, no safe passage, no alternative but distance we didn't have time for. Nome was still 50 miles away. The serum's clock was ticking. I looked north, then down at the ice. If we hesitated, we'd lose the light. If we pressed on, we might lose everything. "Togo," I whispered, "you choose." He blinked slowly, then stepped forward, one paw, then another, testing the surface like a craftsman inspecting his work. The ice groaned, but didn't give. He took another step. The team followed, heads low, tails down. The sled slid after them, inch by inch. Each sound of cracking ice felt like a heartbeat in my throat. Halfway across, the river began to speak. A low, gurgling hum rose beneath us, the voice of the current calling for the living. "Togo," I hissed. "Keep moving." He answered with a sharp bark, lunging forward, the rest of the team mirroring his movement. The sled jolted, the runners skimming faster now, as if even they wanted off this false land. Then came the sound I dreaded most. Crack. The rear runner dropped. Water sprayed up through the split. The dogs yelped, jerking in their harnesses. "Togo, go. Go." He didn't hesitate. He ran. The harness went taut, his body stretching forward with every ounce of strength left in him. The sled scraped and bounced as the ice began to shatter beneath it. I could feel the pull in my arms, the weight of the world behind him, and still he ran. Another crack, another surge of black water. I held my breath. One more second, one more pull, one more miracle, and suddenly the front paws hit snow again. Solid snow. The dogs scrambled forward onto the far bank, dragging the sled behind them. When the last runner touched land, the river split open completely, swallowing the trail we'd just crossed. I dropped to my knees, heart pounding, lungs on fire. Togo stood ahead of me, chest heaving, muzzle white with frost. He turned, tail low, and met my eyes. I wanted to say something heroic, something to match what he'd just done, but all I could manage was a whisper. "Good boy." He blinked slowly, then sat in the snow, his breath fogging the air. Behind us, The river kept moving, its dark current twisting beneath the ice, mocking, sighing, waiting for its next meal. But not today. Not us. When I climbed back onto the sled, I looked down at the canister strapped to my chest and murmured, "You've got a guardian, little one." Togo gave one short bark, as if agreeing. Then we turned toward the white horizon again, and I swore I heard it. The wind whispering through the valley, faint and almost kind this time, not warning us, thanking us. Every trail has ghosts. Some wear faces you remember, others just leave echoes in the wind. By the time we cleared the river, I started hearing them. The voices of the men who'd gone before me and decided the mountain was too much to fight. They weren't cowards. They were just human. The ridge ahead was a graveyard of old paths, half-buried markers, broken sled parts, even a leather glove frozen upright like someone reaching for help that never came. I'd heard stories of this stretch. Mushers who tried to cross the Topcoat Plateau and vanished in blizzards so dense the world forgot their names. Togo slowed as we climbed, the incline steep, the snow powdery and slick. The wind here wasn't howling anymore. It was whispering, low and constant, carrying words that weren't mine. Turn back. No shame in living. Let someone else try. The first time I heard those words, I thought they were memory. The second time, I realized they were coming from ahead, voices caught in the wind, rising and falling like echoes through a canyon. And then I saw them. Two sleds, maybe 300 yards apart, half covered in snow. The dogs were gone, run off or dead. The men were still there. One was slumped over his sled, frozen solid, eyes open, ice growing from his beard. The other lay on his side in the snow, a shovel still in his hand, as if trying to dig his own way out of the storm before it buried him. I stopped the team. The world went silent except for the creak of the harness lines. I walked forward slowly, the snow up to my knees. The bodies were stiff, pale blue in the half-light. One of them wore a wooden tag around his neck, something mushers used when the storms made faces unrecognizable. It read, K. Anders, Gnome Run, 1925. My throat closed. I'd met him once, months back in Anchorage. A quiet man who said he trusted his dogs more than God. He'd turned back on this very trail. He never made it home. Togo stood behind me, ears flat, tail still. He didn't growl, didn't bark. He just watched the frozen men like he was memorizing them. Maybe he was. Dogs remember differently. They don't keep faces, only feelings. I knelt, brushed snow from Anders's coat, and whispered, "You got this far. That counts." Then I stood, eyes burning from more than the wind, and looked north. The path ahead was unbroken. The kind of snow that looked untouched because no one had survived long enough to leave tracks. I thought of Anders, of the men before him, of the chain of hands carrying this small canister through hell. I thought of the children waiting, their breaths shortening as ours fogged the air. And then, for the first time, I felt it, fear. Not the kind that makes you run, but the kind that roots you in place. I wanted to turn back. God help me, I wanted to live. But then Togo barked. Just once. Loud. Sharp. Final. It wasn't a question. It was a command. He looked over his shoulder, eyes bright and cold as the moon. For a moment, it felt like he was scolding me. Move, Jonas. You're still breathing. They're not. I let out a long, shaky breath and nodded. All right. Let on then. He turned, gave a short grunt, and started walking. The other dogs followed without hesitation, their paws crushing the untouched snow. The trail Anders had abandoned was now ours. As the hours passed, I stopped seeing the frozen men when I closed my eyes. Instead, I saw Togo's back, steady, certain, alive. His fur rippled with each stride, his breath coming out in plumes that rose like smoke into the endless white. The ghosts were still there, whispering, waiting, but they no longer sounded like warning. They sounded like witness. And with every step, I realized something cruel and beautiful. Courage doesn't mean you don't want to turn back. It means you don't. By dusk, the last of the markers disappeared under drifting snow. We were off the map now, just a man, a dog, and a promise too heavy to break. I looked up at the darkening sky, whispered into the wind. If I fall, he won't. And ahead of me, Togo barked once, his voice ringing clear through the cold. The sound of the living defying the dead. The first thing you lose in the north isn't your strength. It's your sense of direction. Then your feeling. Then your faith. By the time the ridge disappeared behind us, I was losing all three. The snow had thickened again, soft but endless. It fell so quietly it made sound itself feel distant. My breath came in shallow bursts, each one turning to frost against my scarf. The dogs pulled slower now. Their paws bled freely, dark stains freezing instantly behind them. Togo kept his pace steady. Not fast, not slow, steady. Every few minutes, he'd glance back, making sure I was still upright. Sometimes I wondered if he thought I was the one being led, or if he already knew I'd stopped leading hours ago. The cold had become something alive, crawling inside my clothes, seeping through my bones like slow poison. I couldn't feel my fingers anymore, or my feet. My vision was narrowing, my thoughts fogged. And that's when I heard it. A voice. At first, I thought it was the wind. But then it said my name. Jonas. Soft. Female. Familiar. My mother's voice. She'd been gone 10 years. I'd buried her myself beneath the birches of Anchorage, under a sky so clear it hurt to look at. But here she was again, whispering through the snow. Jonas, stop. You've done enough. I froze mid-step. The reins slipped from my hand. It wasn't a hallucination. It was too clear, too gentle, too warm. The storm seemed to hush, listening. I turned slowly. The snow behind me was empty. Only the wind moved, threading through the white. Then another voice joined hers, fainter, higher. Children. Laughing. My legs buckled. The snow beneath me seemed to tilt and pulse. I fell to one knee, my breath ragged. Children. Gnome's children. They were calling too, their laughter turning to coughing, their coughing to silence. Not yet, I murmured. Not yet. The cold pressed closer, whispering back. Then lie down. Just for a moment. I don't know how long I knelt there, half buried in white. My heartbeat slowed until it was more memory than sound. My eyelids grew heavy. The snow felt soft, almost kind. Somewhere far away, I heard the sled creak. Then a bark, short, sharp, angry. Another bark. Then claws on ice. And then, a weight against my chest. Togo. He'd doubled back. His paws struck my coat, his body pressing against mine. His fur was burning hot against the cold. He barked again, loud enough to echo off the cliffs. Then again, closer to my face. I tried to push him off, but he growled low, deep, a sound I'd never heard from him before. A warning. He started digging at me, pawing my chest, my arms, shaking me. My coat filled with snow, but it didn't matter. The motion brought pain, and pain meant I was still alive. Stop, I croaked. I'm awake, I'm awake. He leaned forward and licked the frost from my cheek, his tongue rough and warm. His breath hit my skin like fire. That's what pulled me back. Not words, not memory. Heat. A living creature reminding me what living felt like. When I finally stood again, the world tilted, then steadied. Togo stepped back, panting hard. His fur was rimmed with frost, eyes fierce and clear. I pressed my forehead to his muzzle. You hear the same voices I do? He blinked once. I figured. Ignore them, then. He huffed softly, almost like a laugh, and turned toward the trail. We moved again, slow and aching, but alive. The snow whispered behind us, trying to call us back. I didn't answer this time. I just kept walking. Hours later, when the moon broke through the clouds, I saw the slope of a cabin roof in the distance, half buried but real. Shelter. I smiled for the first time in days. You did it, boy. You found us a ghost that's still standing. Togo barked once, then limped toward it, tail barely moving. The voice of the wind faded behind us. But I knew what it had said. It hadn't been trying to kill me. It had been testing me. And now, for the first time, it began as a shimmer on the horizon. A faint, flickering light that didn't belong in a place like this. Not fire. Not dawn. Something in between. For a moment, I thought it was hope. But in the north, even hope can lie. We reached the edge of the ridge near midnight. The sky was bruised and restless, streaked with low clouds moving fast as ghosts. Togo slowed to a crawl, his paws sinking deep into drifts that swallowed sound itself. Ahead of us, through the blur of snow, I saw it. A pale glow rising beyond the valley. It pulsed, faint at first, then stronger, rippling across the frozen world like light through smoke. I almost laughed. There it is, boy. Gnome. But Togo didn't move. He stood perfectly still, tail low, ears forward. His hackles rose like frost on wire. The light trembled, split, and then began to move. That's when I realized it wasn't Gnome. It wasn't fire. It wasn't anything made by man. It was the aurora. The northern lights swept across the sky like a slow-breathing serpent, green, blue, violet, twisting and unraveling in silence. It was beautiful, yes, but cruel too, because the aurora doesn't give warmth. It only reminds you how cold you are. I stood there, staring up, dizzy with exhaustion, my knees trembling. I wanted it to mean something, wanted it to be a sign. But all it did was reveal how small we were. The dogs whined softly. Even they could feel it. The beauty of something that could kill you just by being indifferent. Togo turned his head and looked at me, his golden eyes glowing under the shifting colors. For a second, he looked almost otherworldly, like the north itself had chosen a shape to walk beside me. I took a deep breath and whispered, "You ever think we're running inside a dream?" He didn't blink, just stared into the light until it faded. When it finally passed, the sky went black again. Completely black. That's when I saw another light, small, steady, far to the west. Not moving, not shimmering. A single, unwavering dot in the darkness. "Lantern," I said aloud. "That's a man's light." Togo's ears twitched. He barked once, low and certain. I could have wept. My chest ached with something like relief, though I was too tired to feel it properly. We started forward again, the sled groaning under its own weight, my limbs heavy as stone. Each push of the wind was sharper now, the cold biting deeper. My coat had frozen stiff. Every time I flexed my fingers, bits of frost cracked and fell from the cuffs. But the light didn't fade. It stayed, fixed and golden, hanging above the horizon like it was waiting for us. When we finally reached the edge of the outpost, I realized how small it really was. Just a wooden cabin half buried in snow, the lantern swinging outside its door. No smoke, no movement. "Togo," I whispered. "Wait." He froze, nose lifted, sniffing. Then he let out a low whine. Something was wrong. I stepped off the sled, legs buckling under me. My knees hit the snow hard. The cold barely registered anymore. I crawled toward the door, pushed it open with a gloved hand, and nearly fell inside. The place was empty. Bedrolls abandoned. Fire pit cold. The walls blackened with smoke. Whoever had been here had left in a hurry. The lantern outside still burned, half its oil gone. They'd lit it before they left, maybe as a signal, maybe as a memorial. I slumped down beside the doorway, back against the frozen wall. My head dropped forward. We're too late. The silence pressed closer. I could hear my own pulse slowing. Then I felt it, warmth against my arm. Togo had come to my side and was lying down, his body pressed against mine, his breath heavy and labored. His fur radiated faint heat through my coat, enough to keep the edge of death away. I rested my hand on his neck. His heart was still strong, steady. Outside, the aurora flickered faintly again, like an old wick refusing to die. And for a moment, under that cold green light, I whispered to no one. "If that's all we are, light that burns and fades, then let us burn a little longer." We stayed like that until morning, man and dog breathing in rhythm, the lantern's glow growing weaker with each hour. When I finally rose again, the sky was gray, and the snow had stopped falling. Togo stood, slow but unbroken, and looked at me as if to say, "You had your rest. Now move." So we moved. Morning came gray and hollow. The light was weak, like it was afraid to touch this place. When I stepped outside, the air was heavy with silence, the kind that follows something terrible, the kind that listens. We were standing in the middle of nowhere, at the edge of a world that didn't care if we kept breathing. The outpost, this lonely cabin, was supposed to be a checkpoint, a place of rest, fire, and men. Now it was just another empty space on the map. Togo sniffed the ground near the sled, pacing in slow, deliberate circles. His tail hung low, his movements careful, cautious. Every so often he'd stop, lift his nose, and let out a short, uneasy whine. The dogs felt it too, the wrongness. I crouched beside the door, tracing my gloved fingers over the rough wood. Claw marks, deep ones, scarred the frame. Not from wolves. From dogs. They'd been scratching to get out. Inside, the cabin smelled of ash and sickness. I found blankets stiff with frost, broken harnesses, a kettle half filled with frozen water, and a wooden bowl overturned on the floor. The wind slipped through the cracks in the wall, sighing through the empty space where voices used to be. On the table sat a single boot. Inside it, a scrap of paper, folded tight. I pulled it out with trembling hands and held it close to the window for light. The writing was faint, nearly erased by damp, but I could still make it out. Storm coming from the north. Left with what we could carry. Dogs too weak to run. God forgive us. No names. No farewell. Just the last confession of men who had run out of choices. I sat there for a long time, the paper shaking between my fingers. They had tried. They had done everything right. Prepared, planned, believed. And still, the cold had taken them. For the first time, it struck me that belief wasn't enough. Skill wasn't enough. Even love for the living wasn't enough. Out here, survival was a coin toss. And the North flipped it however it pleased. I folded the note and placed it back on the table, pressing it flat like a prayer. Then I whispered, "You got as far as you could." When I turned, Togo was watching me from the doorway. His breath hung in the air like smoke, his fur glinting faintly in the weak light. "Come on, boy," I said quietly. "We're not ghosts yet." He stepped inside, walked past the table, and went straight to the corner near the bed. There, half buried under a fur blanket, lay a small shape. A dog, frozen stiff. Its eyes were open. Togo sniffed once, then backed away slowly, his ears folding flat. He looked at me, and for the first time on this journey, I saw something in him I hadn't before. Grief. I knelt beside him and placed a hand on his head. "I know," I whispered. "He was one of yours." He pressed his muzzle into my palm, breathing a low whine that trembled like a heartbeat. That's when I realized how close we were to the same edge, the one that separates the living from the remembered. I couldn't let him cross it. Not yet. I found a few logs stacked by the stove, wet, but still wood. I broke them down and struck a match. The flame took its time, hissing and struggling before finally catching. It wasn't much, but it was life. The fire's glow spread slowly across the walls, painting warmth onto the cold wood. The dogs crept closer, curling into the light like soldiers returning home. Togo lay down last, his head resting near the serum canister still strapped to my chest. I looked at that small cylinder, dull and unremarkable, and whispered, "You've outlived more men than I can count." The fire crackled in answer. Outside, the wind had calmed, the air thick with waiting. I stared into the flames until they blurred into color, green, blue, gold, like the aurora trapped in wood. And for the first time in days, I allowed myself to believe in tomorrow. But as I drifted into half-sleep, one thought kept circling through my mind. When the wind shifts in the north, had believed it doesn't ask permission. It simply decides you've rested long enough. By dawn, the world had changed again. The sky was an iron lid, heavy with snow, and the air hummed with pressure, the kind that makes even silence sound dangerous. The dog sensed it first. Togo was already on his feet when I opened my eyes, staring out through the broken window toward the east. His breath fogged the glass, his fur trembling slightly though the room was still. He turned once to look at me, and I understood. It was time to move. We left the cabin behind before the sun had cleared the ridge. The fire had died hours ago. I didn't look back at the outpost, didn't need to. The north remembers its own dead. The trail wound down into a narrow valley. The snow grew thinner here, replaced by patches of ice that shone blue beneath the pale light. Ahead, I heard the sound of running water, distant but certain. That meant one thing, a river. The dogs picked up speed, paws scraping against the frozen crust. Togo's tail rose slightly, the sign of alertness, of command. He knew what I knew, that rivers were both gift and curse. Smooth ground for speed, and thin ground for death. When we reached it, the Topcoke River stretched wide as a field, frozen in uneven ridges that caught the morning light. But I could hear it underneath, the soft gurgle of the current, alive, restless, waiting. We'd already survived one crossing. This one looked worse. Cracks ran through the ice like veins, glinting black and blue. Some were narrow as a hairline, others wide enough to swallow a sled hole. I crouched down and tapped the surface with my boot. The echo came back hollow. "Finn," I muttered. Togo paced along the edge, nose down, tracing invisible lines, his body tense. The other dogs whined behind him, shifting their weight. We didn't have time to go around. The detour would cost us a full day, maybe two. Gnome didn't have 2 days. "Easy boy," I whispered. "Just a short crossing. You've done worse." He looked back at me, and I could swear his eyes said, "You sure about that?" I smiled faintly. "No. We went slow. Each step forward was a negotiation. The sled creaked like old wood. My breath came out in shallow bursts, loud in the quiet. Halfway across, the wind rose again, out of nowhere, fierce and cold. It sliced through my coat like knives. The ice groaned under us, shifting. "Keep going," I shouted. Togo's ears flattened against his skull. He barked once, sharp and angry, rallying the team. The sled jerked forward. That's when the surface cracked. The sound was sharp and final, like glass shattering. The ice split beneath the last pair of dogs, plunging half the sled into the freezing black. "Hold!" I screamed, throwing my weight backward on the reins. The sled teetered, half in, half out. Water surged through the gap, dark and violent. The dogs yelped, scrambling for footing. Togo lunged forward, straining against the harness. The rope went taut, muscles rippling under his fur as he dug in, claws tearing at the ice. He pulled until his body trembled, the veins in his legs visible beneath his coat. For one terrible moment, it wasn't enough. The sled began to slide back toward the hole. Then I jumped. I threw myself off the sled and onto the ice ahead of him, slamming my chest down flat, spreading my weight. "Pull, Togo! Pull!" He bared his teeth and roared, a sound I didn't think a dog could make, and pulled with everything left in him. The harness lines snapped one by one, but not before the sled lurched forward onto solid ice. I lay there, gasping, the cold burning through me. My arms ached, my legs numb. Togo stumbled toward me, collapsed beside my head, and pressed his body against mine. His fur was wet, his breath ragged. I turned my face toward him and laughed, half from madness, half from joy. "You're going to kill me saving me." He gave a low, rumbling huff that might have been agreement. We rested there for nearly an hour, the river's hiss fading into the background. When I finally stood, my limbs screamed in protest. The serum canister was still tied to my chest. Still safe. The river had tried to take it. The north had tried to take it. But the chain of hands still held. I reached down, cupped Togo's jaw in my gloved palm, and whispered, "You don't just hear the wind, do you? You fight it." He blinked slowly, tired but alert, and looked toward the horizon where the sky was beginning to bruise with another storm. I exhaled, frost curling in the air. "Yeah," I said softly. "Me too." You don't notice darkness in the Arctic until it takes the last thing you can see, your own breath. That night, even my breath disappeared. The storm that followed the river was unlike any I'd ever known. Not violent, not loud, just endless. The snow came quietly this time, a slow burial that made the world shrink around us inch by inch. It muffled the sound of our footsteps, swallowed our trail, and turned the horizon into a blank page where even the wind forgot what direction meant. By dusk, there was no sky left, no moon, no shadow, only gray upon gray, and the low groan of the sled as it scraped across unseen ground. I had tied a rope from my waist to the sled to keep from losing it. Somewhere ahead, Togo led the team through the dark, guided by instincts I no longer understood. Every few minutes, I called out his name just to remind myself he was real. "Togo." The sound vanished into the storm like it had been eaten. Then, faint, rhythmic, I'd hear it again. The crunch of his paws, the jingle of the lead line, the sound of one heartbeat still moving through the void. Hours passed, maybe more. Time had stopped meaning anything. The cold was no longer pain. It had become silence. My hands were beyond numb, my face crusted with frost. My beard was a block of ice. My eyelids stuck together every time I blinked. I thought of fires, of wooden floors, of warmth that didn't have to be earned. Then I thought of the children in Nome. The image came without warning. A small boy coughing blood into his pillow while his mother sang softly to drown the sound. I'd seen that once, years ago, during the influenza epidemic in Anchorage. That sound never left me. The sled had adrift. I stumbled, fell to my knees, and stayed there, shaking. The serum pressed against my chest like a heartbeat. It was still warm from my body heat. Still alive. I wasn't sure I could say the same about myself. That's when Togo barked. It wasn't his usual bark, the sharp, commanding tone of a leader. This was shorter, rougher, urgent. I looked up and saw nothing. Just snow. But the bark came again, closer this time, then the faint sound of paws circling. He'd come back for me. A dark shape emerged from the storm, his outline barely visible against the white. His fur glowed faintly with frost, and his eyes reflected what little light there was like twin coals. He came straight to me, bumping his head against my shoulder, hard enough to make me grunt. "All right," I muttered through cracked lips. "I'm up. You win." He barked once more, then turned back toward the trail. I grabbed the sled handle and followed, legs trembling. Every few feet, he looked over his shoulder, checking that I was still moving. When I stumbled, he stopped. When I slowed, he waited. The rhythm of his paws became the only sound in the world. Step, breathe, step, breathe, a pulse, a prayer, a promise. After what felt like eternity, I saw it. A faint glow ahead, golden and still. At first I thought it was another trick of the light, another cruel reflection off the snow. But it didn't fade. The wind shifted, bringing with it a smell, smoke. Real, human smoke. "Cabin," I croaked. "There's another cabin." Togo barked twice, the sound sharp with energy. He broke into a slow trot, his tail rising. The others followed, their bodies low but eager. My heart thudded weakly. Every nerve screamed to stop, but I couldn't. Not with light in front of me again. We reached a clearing. The glow came from a lantern hanging crookedly outside a small wooden shack. The door was half open, snow piled at its base. I didn't go inside right away. I just stood there, leaning on the sled, breathing shallowly. The air smelled of smoke and salt meat. Someone had been here recently, but the silence inside told me they weren't here anymore. Togo pressed his muzzle against my hand, warm and firm. I looked down at him and smiled faintly. "You keep finding ghosts, don't you?" He blinked, as if to say maybe, but I'll keep finding them until one opens a door. I nodded slowly. "Then let's go find the living." As I pulled the sled inside and shut the door, the wind screamed once, loud, defiant, furious. Then it was gone. For the first time in days, there was something like peace. It didn't last long, but it was enough. Enough to light a fire. Enough to breathe without fear. Enough to remember that the dark only wins when you stop walking. I used to think the North only killed you once. But the truth is, it kills you slowly, layer by layer, breath by breath, until you stop remembering what warmth even felt like. By the time we left the cabin that morning, I could feel death watching us. Not as an enemy, but as an audience. The trail wound upward again, long, narrow, and silent. The snow was crusted hard, each step a crack in the stillness. The wind had calmed, but the cold had deepened, so sharp it made sound brittle, like glass breaking in slow motion. Togo led us into the mountains, paws sure despite the ice. The others followed, their bodies hunched low, their breath rising in short, hard bursts. I walked beside the sled, one hand gripping the handle, the other clutching the serum under my coat. It was warm against my chest. I'd begun to think of it as a child, a fragile life I was carrying through a dying world. The sun never showed itself. The light just faded until the day felt like dusk. Somewhere above us, the cliffs moaned as the frost shifted inside their bones. The slope grew steeper. I leaned into the sled, pushing as the dogs pulled. Each step was a fight against gravity and exhaustion. Then Togo stopped. He froze mid-stride, head up, ears rigid. "Easy, boy," I said, breathing hard. "What is it?" He sniffed the air, then took a cautious step forward. The snow beneath him made a sound I hadn't heard in days, soft, hollow, wrong. Before I could call out, the ground gave way. It didn't happen fast. It happened slowly enough to be cruel. The ice cracked, the snow sagged, and then the world folded under us. The sled dropped first, dragging me with it. I felt weightlessness, the rush of air, the snap of rope, and then, impact. Pain exploded through my leg. A sound tore from my throat before I even knew I was screaming. When I opened my eyes, everything was white and still. We'd fallen into a ravine, 20 feet deep, maybe more. The sled lay on its side, half buried. The serum was still against my chest, thank God. But my leg. I looked down. It was twisted at an angle no bone should allow. I tried to sit up, but the pain was blinding. Hell, I hissed, biting down hard. The dogs above barked frantically, their faces appearing at the rim of the ravine, shadows against the pale light. "Togo," I shouted. He was gone from sight. My heart slammed against my ribs. I turned my head, searching, panic clawing through the pain. Then I saw him. He was down there with me, standing on the broken slope, snow up to his chest, staring at me with those gold, impossible eyes. He must have jumped after me. "You stupid, brave thing," I gasped, half laughing, half sobbing. He came closer, nosed my arm, then turned his head toward the sled. He started digging furiously, paws moving so fast snow flew like sparks. I realized what he was after, the lead rope. When he found it, he gripped it in his teeth and pulled. Hard. The sled shifted, inch by inch, scraping free from the snow. Togo, I whispered, no, the leg, He barked sharply, eyes blazing. He didn't care about the leg. He cared about the serum, the mission, the lives we'd promised to save. He kept pulling until his body shook. I could hear the strain in his breath, the soft grunt of muscle against resistance. Finally, the sled broke loose, sliding down beside me. He dropped the rope, panting, and looked back up the slope, the way we'd come. Then he turned to me, and in that moment, I understood what he meant to do. No, I said weakly. No, not alone. You'll never find it. You'll never. He barked once. Loud. Final. Then he pressed his head against my hand, for just a second, and bolted up the slope. I shouted until my throat was raw. The sound went nowhere. Above me, the snow swallowed him whole. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, faintly, I heard it. The rhythm of pause. Fading. Rising. Gone. I lay back against the ice, tears freezing to my face. Somewhere deep inside the pain, I smiled. Because I knew. He was running toward Nome. Toward the light. Toward life. And if any creature could outrun the death that ruled this land, it was him. I've often wondered what he saw when he left me. Did he glance back one last time before the storm swallowed me? Or did he run without looking? Because looking back meant slowing down? Either way, I never blamed him. Togo wasn't leaving me behind. He was carrying me forward. I remember the sound first. Not the wind. Not the river. The sound of pause. Fast, rhythmic, sure. Through the haze of pain and fever, I could hear him running. Even when the world went black, I heard that rhythm. A steady drumbeat of life against the silence. Each thud said one thing, go. While I lay broken in that ravine, Togo ran. He ran through a storm that had no beginning and no end. The night was a blur of white and shadow, the cold biting through his fur, ice hanging from his chest like chains. But he didn't stop. He couldn't. The serum was still tied to the sled, the leather straps digging into his sides as he pulled. The rest of the team followed, whimpering, slipping, stumbling. But Togo barked them onward, each sound slicing through the wind like a blade. He didn't know how many miles were left. Didn't know how close death was behind him. All he knew was forward. Forward toward the faint memory of firelight. Forward toward the voices of children he'd never meet. The wind grew harsher. The snow turned to needles, slicing at his muzzle until blood speckled the frost. But he lowered his head and kept moving. He ran by instinct now, by smell, by sound, by some invisible thread that tied him to the promise I'd made. Every step was agony, every breath a knife. But still he ran. He crossed the river again, half frozen, water surging beneath him. The sled dipped, the ice cracked, but he lunged forward, claws scraping, dragging the weight across inch by inch. When the last runner cleared the far side, he collapsed for a second, just long enough to breathe, then stood again. He didn't know he was alone now. He didn't know I was lying miles behind, like shattered, watching the sky fade. Or maybe he did know, and that's why he ran harder. By dawn, the storm had softened, but the air was colder than before. The horizon glowed faintly pink, fragile and false. Togo's eyes were bloodshot, his legs shaking, but his stride never broke. He had become something more than animal now. A force of motion, a soul made of wind and ice. When the trail veered east toward the coastline, he followed without hesitation. His nose twitched, smoke, salt, human scent. Nome was close, but the dogs behind him were finished. One collapsed mid-run, another limped and fell. Togo stopped, turned, whined softly. He waited. They didn't move. He looked toward the horizon again, tail twitching, torn between duty and instinct. Then he did what no man could have ordered him to do. He pressed forward alone. The last stretch was downhill, a sheer slope of frozen sea. The wind cut sideways, carrying snow in long white sheets. He couldn't see more than a few yards ahead, but he didn't need to. The smell of fire grew stronger. The sound of men shouting. Then, through the veil of snow, he saw it. A lantern swinging outside a wooden gate, flames flickering gold against the blue ice. Nome. The last mile nearly killed him. His legs buckled twice, his lungs wheezed. He stumbled once, fell hard, the serum canister slamming against his chest. But he stood again, always again. When he finally staggered into the main street, the town erupted. Men shouted, bells rang, doors flew open. A boy cried out, "It's the sled. The serum's here." Togo dropped to his belly, gasping, snow rising around him. His eyes flickered, unfocused, searching the crowd for something. For me. He didn't find me, but he still wagged his tail once. Weak, slow, but proud. They lifted the canister from his harness, hands trembling. One man whispered, "He brought it. He actually brought it." And as they rushed the serum into the doctor's house, someone knelt beside Togo, brushing frost from his fur. The man said softly, "Rest now, friend. You've done enough." But I like to think that even then, even as the world blurred around him, Togo's mind wasn't on rest. It was on the trail, on the wind, on me, and somewhere far behind him, in the frozen ravine where the light could not reach. I smiled through the pain and whispered into the storm, "Run, boy." When I opened my eyes, I wasn't sure I was still alive. The sky above the ravine was pale blue, soft as breath after storm. Snowflakes drifted like ashes, lazy and weightless. For the first time in days, there was no wind, only silence. It was a strange kind of peace, the kind that felt borrowed. My leg was still broken. My hands were stiff and swollen. But the cold that had once burned me now only hummed. A quiet ache, like the north had finally stopped trying to kill me and started to wait. Then I remembered. Togo. I tried to sit up, and the pain nearly split me in two. But pain meant I was still here, alive enough to hope. The rope beside me was slack, the sled half buried. The harness he'd worn was gone, the snow torn and trampled where he'd launched himself up the slope. He was gone, running. For a moment, I closed my eyes and imagined it, the sound of his paws against the frozen ground, the way the air would bend around him. I pictured the serum pressed to his chest, the dogs falling behind, the world shrinking to a single, golden heartbeat in motion. And for the first time since the storm began, I smiled. If anyone could make it, it was him. I must have drifted in and out of consciousness after that. The hours lost their shape. Sometimes I saw the sky turn violet. Sometimes it was black. I remember whispering prayers I didn't believe in, names of people long dead, songs from my mother's kitchen, anything to keep the silence from swallowing me whole. When I woke again, the air had changed. The wind carried sound. Distant. Faint. Bells. Far away, in the heart of the storm's ghost, Nome was alive. The bells rang from the church tower, echoing through the frozen streets. Windows lit up one by one, voices rising like smoke. Men were running, shouting, calling each other's names. A woman cried out, "They've got it. The serum's here." The crowd gathered near the doctor's house, the lantern lights spilling over the snow. And there he was, Togo, lying in the center of it all. His fur was crusted with ice, his sides heaving. The harness straps hung loose around him. The sled was still upright, the serum canister tied to its front, glinting faintly under the lamplight. One man knelt beside him, hand trembling as he reached for the canister. It was warm, still sealed. "God bless," he whispered. "God bless this dog." The doctor took it and disappeared inside, and within minutes, the house filled with movement. The door slammed. Curtains drew. The lamps inside flared bright. A town on the edge of death was breathing again. Outside, people began to weep. Not loud, just quiet tears falling into the snow, vanishing before they froze. And still, Togo didn't move. They wrapped him in blankets, tried to lift him. He growled weakly, refusing to be carried, his gaze fixed on the road behind him, as if waiting for me. Someone said, "He won't close his eyes." The town fell silent for a moment, watching him. And then the bells rang again, not for warning this time, but for gratitude. A sound that rolled through the cold and over the ridges, reaching farther than anyone realized. Even to me. I swear I heard them. There in the ravine, half frozen and half conscious, I heard the faint echo of those bells. And in that sound, I heard his story ending. Not with glory, not with applause, but with peace. The wind shifted, brushing against my face, and I whispered, "You made it, boy. You really made it." I don't remember much after that. Only that I stopped fighting the cold for a while and let sleep take me. Not as surrender, but as faith. Because somewhere beyond the horizon, life had won. and a dog had carried it there. When I woke again, it wasn't to the cold. It was to warmth. A strange, soft warmth that didn't belong to the north. The air smelled faintly of smoke and medicine. I heard voices, muffled, human, alive. Someone said, "He's waking up." For a second, I thought I was dreaming. Light hurt my eyes when I opened them. The ceiling above me was wooden, low, and cracked, the kind built by tired hands. A fire burned somewhere close, the sound of crackling logs steady and real. I blinked until faces came into focus. Two men stood at the foot of my cot, one in a wool coat, the other in an apron. The man in the coat smiled when he saw me. "You're one lucky son of a gun," he said softly. "You're a gnome, cur. You made it." I tried to speak, but my throat was raw, my lips split. All I managed was a hoarse whisper. "Togo." The smile faded from his face. He looked down, hesitated. "Rest first," he murmured. I forced my body upright, pain flashing white behind my eyes. "The dog. Tell me." The man in the apron, a doctor, I realized, stepped forward. His voice was gentle, careful. "He got here before the others. Delivered the serum. Saved us all." He paused. But the journey broke him. He didn't make it through the night. For a moment, the world went silent again. Not the kind of silence that comes from snow, but the kind that comes when something inside you stops breathing. I closed my eyes. I could still hear it. The rhythm of his paws, the sharp bark in the dark, the weight of him pressing against my chest when I'd been too cold to feel anything else. He'd been more than a dog. He'd been everything the world had left. And now, the world had taken him too. I don't know how long I sat there, staring into the fire. The doctor said something about frostbite, about saving my leg, about the serum working, but none of it mattered. I'd given everything I had to the north, and it had taken the best of me in return. When they brought me water, I asked them to leave. When they asked about pain, I said I couldn't feel any. They thought I meant my leg. I didn't. Later that night, when the room was dark and quiet, I pulled myself from the cot. My body screamed with every movement, but I didn't care. The door opened to a world of stillness. The storm had passed. The air was clear, the stars sharp as broken glass. Gnomes slept. I followed the faint line of footprints through the snow, men's boots, women's shoes, and then smaller, lighter prints that veered off toward the edge of town. His prints. They led to a small rise beyond the church, where a lantern still burned beside a mound of snow. A marker stood there, rough wood, hastily carved. It read, "Togo. He carried life through death." I stood there for a long time, the wind brushing past like breath. Every sound in the world seemed distant now. The creak of wood, the sigh of trees, the faint echo of bells in the frozen air. I knelt, my knees sinking into the snow, and laid my hand against the mound. It was cold, but not cruel. "I told you we'd make it," I whispered. The words caught in my throat. "I just didn't know I meant you." Behind me, the town slept peacefully. Children breathed easier. Fires burned bright. And for the first time in weeks, the north was quiet, not because it had won, but because it was listening. I closed my eyes and breathed out slowly. "Rest easy, boy," I murmured. "I'll finish the run from here." The wind moved across the ridge, stirring the lantern's flame. It flickered once, twice, then steadied, burning stronger. And in that small, trembling light, I thought I saw him again, running across the horizon, golden fur catching fire beneath the stars. They buried him at dawn. No words, no ceremony, just silence, the kind of silence that fits better than prayer. The townsfolk stood in a circle around the mound, their faces half hidden behind scarves. The wind was gentle that morning, as if even the north itself had paused to watch. The doctor placed his hat over his heart. A child, a little girl wrapped in wool too big for her, stepped forward and laid a scrap of red cloth on the snow. It was a ribbon. Her mother whispered, "It's all she had to give." The rest of us had even less. I didn't speak during the burial. I couldn't. The words would have frozen before they left my mouth. Instead, I stood at the edge of the crowd, leaning on a crutch, staring at the simple wooden marker that bore his name. Togo. Nothing else. I thought about all the names carved into the ice out here. Men who'd built bridges, worked the rails, fought the blizzards, and vanished without trace. They had records, plaques, medals. But this dog, this one creature of blood and breath, had done what none of us could. He hadn't conquered the north. He'd outrun it. And for that, there would never be a monument big enough. After the others left, I stayed. The sun was climbing higher now, spilling weak gold across the snow. It caught on the ice crystals, scattering tiny sparks of light that danced across the mound. I crouched slowly, my legs screaming in protest, and placed a small rock at the edge of the grave. Then another, and another. A cairn, like we trappers used to build to mark safe paths. A promise that this place wouldn't be forgotten. When I'd finished, I brushed the snow from my glove and whispered, "You were never mine, Togo. You belonged to the wind." The days that followed passed like echoes. Nome healed. The fever broke. The children began to play in the streets again, their laughter cutting through the frost like sunlight. But I didn't stay to watch it for long. I couldn't. The world that had almost killed me was calling me back. When I left town, the same doctor met me at the edge of the trail. He pressed a small flask into my hand. "For the pain," he said. Then, quieter, "He saved my daughter." I nodded. "He saved all of us." The doctor hesitated, then added, "They're building a statue for the serum run. The papers are calling it the Great Race of Mercy." "A statue," I said softly, looking down the white horizon. "For men." He nodded. "And for dogs." I smiled faintly. "Make sure they get the order right." The trail was empty again. The sound of my sled runners cutting through the snow was the only heartbeat in miles. The cold bit at my cheeks, the sky stretched endless above me, and the wind returned. Low, familiar, restless. For a moment, it sounded like breathing. Then, faintly like footsteps. I closed my eyes and listened. Togo's rhythm was still there, steady and strong, pacing just ahead, invisible but real. Every musher knows that sound. It never leaves you. It's not the wind. It's not memory. It's something older. The call of the one who led you through the dark and refused to die quietly. By nightfall, I'd reached the ridge again, the same one where we'd first faced the storm. The sky above was clear now, the stars burning cold and bright. I stopped the sled and looked out across the endless white. The cairn was behind me, small and lost in the distance, but the wind carried the faintest whisper from that direction, soft, curling, warm against my ear. It said nothing I could understand, but it made me smile, because maybe some stories don't end where the road does. Maybe they keep running, on four legs, through snow that never forgets. I leaned into the wind, whispering one last time, "Run far, old friend. I'll follow when the world lets me." And somewhere beyond sight, I swear I heard him bark, sharp, joyful, and free, as the wind carried his voice across the frozen horizon. It's been many winters since that run. The world has grown quieter, softer, smaller. But the North never changes. I live now in a cabin on the edge of Anchorage, where the trees lean close to the river and the wind carries secrets through the cracks in the walls. Most nights, the fire burns low, the kettle hums softly, and I sit by the window with a blanket over my bad leg, listening to the world breathe. People still talk about the serum run of 25. They call it the race that saved Nome. They write names in newspapers, carve them into stone, hang medals on the walls of government halls. But names are just noise. The wind remembers the truth. Every spring, when the snow begins to loosen its grip on the earth, children from the village come to visit. They ask me to tell them the story. "Tell us about the blizzard," they say. "Tell us about the dog that saved the town." I never start with the storm. I start with silence, with the sound of paws against the snow, because that's where the story truly lives. Not in the cold or the courage, but in the rhythm of something that never gave up. I tell them about a dog with eyes like gold and a heart made of thunder, about how he outran death itself, not because he was fearless, but because he refused to stop moving. And when I reach the end, when I tell them he's gone, they always look at me the same way, like I've told them a sad story. But they're wrong. It isn't sad. He didn't die. He became the wind. Some nights, when the air turns sharp again and the aurora crawls across the sky, I step outside and stand in the snow. The lights ripple, green, blue, violet, curling over the mountains like they're remembering something. And then, just beneath their shimmer, I hear it. A soft bark, a whisper of paws, a breath that matches mine. He's still out there, I know it, running the same trail, carrying the same promise, guiding lost souls through the white silence. Maybe that's what legends really are. Not stories told, but lives that keep moving even after the body stops. I've left my own things ready now. My journal, the map of our route, worn through at the corners, and a single leather collar, cracked, faded, still warm where my hand touches it. When my time comes, I don't want graves or speeches. I just want to be buried under open sky, beside the cairn we built. No name, no date, just wind. Because out there, names don't matter. Only the trail does. Only the running. Last night, as the fire dimmed, I dreamed again. The sky was endless, the snow unbroken, and ahead of me, I saw him, Togo, turning his head just once, his eyes catching the light. He didn't wait. He never does. He just barked once, as if to say, "Come on, old man. Relate." When I woke, the wind was blowing through the window. It was cold, yes, but it carried something softer, something alive. I smiled, stood slowly, and whispered into the night, "I'm coming, boy." The wind answered, gentle and sure. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Somewhere out there, under the shifting light of the north, two silhouettes move across the snow, one man, one dog. Running, always running, their breath lost to the wind. Their story never truly ending. The end.